What happened the time your father floated in Lake Michigan while ice fishing?
Oh, my grandpa. Oh, that was funny. My grandpa had an ice shanty. Now, this is my grandpa. This is my dad's dad and my Aunt Edith's dad. He was the greatest fisherman. I went out with him many times, and at 4:30 in the morning, because he said, you're going to fish, you got to go out when the fish are eating, when they're feeding, and early in the morning. And go out early in the morning or in the evening, and when they also feed then. But he had a shanty out on the ice, and what they would do, they would walk out to the shanty. My mother very often walked across the ice from Escanaba to Stonington to her parents' home over on the farm, and she took us a couple of times too, I remember, and we walked across the ice. It wasn't too far. It was probably a couple miles. But anyway, going back to my grandpa, he had a shanty out there. He'd go out there, and he'd sit all day long. He gets in the shanty. It's all enclosed, and he had a little kerosene stove. They didn't have heaters like we have now or anything. Had a little kerosene stove to keep him warm, and he's sitting there fishing, and what was happening was that the ice was thawing on the lake, and unknown to him, he was starting to float out onto the open water, and the guard, what do they call it, the lifeguard, not lifeguard, but anyway, the people came, so I guess somebody reported that there was a shanty starting to float out into the open water, and here's this Coast Guard, that's what it was. The Coast Guard was called, and to make sure that there wasn't somebody in that shanty, and they're calling to my grandpa, and my grandpa's sitting there fishing, having a ball hauled in 2 or 3 fish, and finally, I think he's probably a little hard of hearing, and he finally heard the Coast Guard calling to him that he had to get out. And so they finally did get his attention. He stopped fishing, and they did. They got him out. But the shanty, the shanty was out floating in the lake proper, in the big lake. It wasn't along where the ice was. And they teased him about that all the time, about the time that he had to be rescued by the Coast Guard when he was so involved in his fishing that he didn't even hear them calling to him to get out, because he was floating out in the water into the lake. Yeah, Lake Michigan is a bay there that goes into Escanaba and then back south, and it's a nice area. It was I said in the summertime they had a fishing company. They were cousins of my mother and dad. Their name was Jensen, and of course my mother's name was Hanson, and she had a couple brothers, three brothers really. There was Uncle Hans was the oldest one, and then there was Uncle Peter, was next in line, and Uncle, Uncle George. Uncle George was the youngest, yeah. And then there was my mother, and my Aunt Mary. My mother had a sister by the name of Mary, and they were the only 2 girls. And I remember they had a dog on the farm, and I remember we loved that dog, and we thought we'd like to have a dog too. My mother was she was too much of a neat and clean person to have a dog around. She wouldn't even think of having a dog around. But